What do you want to be when you grow up? It's a common question for kids, but for adults, the question becomes, what do you do for a living? As adults, our identities melt into our income-earning jobs in a one-dimensional way that can harden us, prevent us from being curious, from asking questions like, what do we want to be when we grow up? As adults, the decisions have been decided. The pants are being worn, the food's in the microwave, the car's warming up. Sure, we wear many different hats, but we really only identify with the income-earning hat. We are what we're paid to be, and for many of us, there's no room for more hats. But for kids, the insatiably curious, and the Renaissance lawyer, hats are where it's at. What if the future of being a lawyer is learning how to be a good hat stand? Finding out what skills and passions you or others can bring to your practice, igniting your curiosity to identify and creatively solve problems in your process, recognizing and utilizing all the tools and talent around you that can elevate your firm. Well, that's what we're talking about today. We're unpacking the multi-disciplinarian future of practicing law and finding out how to become indispensable in the law firm of tomorrow. How to become the Renaissance lawyer. Let's go.
Lawsome, the podcast for law firms. Powered by Consultwebs.
Welcome back to Lawsome, the only podcast that wears sunglasses at night. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain the legal community about the latest in personal and business development. I am your co-host, Jake Sanders, and fresh out of the 3D printer, a replicant version of Chicago's original deep dish, Paul Julius joins me. What's happening, Home Slice?
I'm still warm and smelling good, my friend. How you doing?
So tasty. But cheesy, right?
That's right. You have to balance it, I think.
Yeah, your knock jokes. It's like just classy, really. It's cheesy, but it's working. Right. So let's talk about what's on this show today. Tell the audience what they have in store.
All right, on the show today, we discuss 3 reasons why legal firms can't ignore legal tech from lawtechnologytoday.org. We interview contract lawyer and legal tech enthusiast Colin Levy about the future and what it takes to be a Renaissance lawyer. And we put Colin on the hot bench for 10 questions we ask everyone.
Pull up a plate. It's the Hot Takes Buffet.
The article today is from lawtechnologytoday.org. Law firms can't avoid tech innovation, by Jackson Burke. It's a great article. The reasons were, number 1, the millennials demand it. 2, billable hours. You can use tech to change the way you approach that admin work, so you can't ignore tech there. And mobile tech, mobile behaviors, changing the way people interact with products and services. So the attention is going to devices. So firms that use those devices will draw new hires, new clients, things like that. So you can't avoid it. My thought is that you can't avoid it, but who can you trust to give you the good information, so you don't unnecessarily have a blockchain intake process? Like, I don't know if that's necessary. I don't know if we need Bitcoin in the parking lot. Do we? So I think my question is that lawyers who are approaching this stuff, if you're enthusiastic about doing research and really digging into the processes, it's a great time for you to be inspired. But it's also a dangerous time for you to get taken by somebody who maybe is going to sell you on a shiny new tool and not give you the information on why. So I think lawyers need to figure out why they can't ignore it. And how they can use legal tech. So this article is a good start.
Yeah, well said. I agree, and I think that an underlying point too is that it's happening. I mean, you have to be paying attention to it on some level anyway, even if it's small things like maybe automating the intake process a little bit or something like that. I mean, there's gentler ways, I think, to get into it than just having to jump in and have an AI do your, discovery research or something.
Right.
There was one thing I noticed though, talking about the billable hours. This has struck me before, and we've discussed it with other guests before, that using this billable hour model, as we become more efficient, it becomes more difficult, whether perceived or on paper, to justify charging for a certain amount of time if it now takes less time. So I wonder how often there's this, this like job security thing, this fear of, not being able to charge an hour for something that now takes 25 minutes, or you can outsource entirely.
Well, and for me, I think it's maybe a race towards the bottom, like who can do it for the cheapest. So pretty soon I'm going to be looking for a lawyer on Fiverr, because you said you could do it for $5, and a lawyer's, how do you compete with someone who can do your job for free? And that's sort of like the approach to tech innovation is, the way I get my billable hour is by slogging through emails and slogging through all this stuff. And if I hire a robot to do it, those billable hours disappear. But you're not encapsulating what the value of that process is. And you could keep your rates at the same level, but you'd have to just help people perceive the benefits differently, including that tech fix. Well, I saw a point, the author, Jackson Burke, he says that the legal industry is hesitant to change, but he gives an example of judges wearing black robes, saying that they don't have to, that it's just tradition that says that judges have to wear robes. But there's something about innovation, like disrupting traditions, that is probably the reason why a lot of people say, well, that doesn't make sense because we've always done it like this. But when he says that people are wearing, like judges wearing black robes is just a tradition, I think it's more than that. I think there's intangible elements to practitioners and people who participate in the theater of law. When a judge puts on that robe, they become the law. And that's not a tradition that you just kind of throw out. And so now a judge shows up looking like he's out of Brokeback Mountain, wearing denim and a cowboy hat, throwing the gavel at people. It's like, oh, that's non-traditional. I like the way this judge is so innovative. There's something about tradition and the things that define where we came from that I would hope tech innovation just sort of highlights and strengthens and maybe, emboldens the traditions and the foundations. And later on in our interview, Colin gives really good, solid advice for someone that the tech comes after you identify and understand the processes and the problems that need solutions. So you can't just throw batteries at something and expect it to turn on. You have to figure out why it works and what it needs. And that's where innovation and disruption can happen. But I think that a lot of people are hesitant to change because it just seems like it's a whole bunch of millennials running in, just trashing everything because no one reads books anymore. We're going to burn the library down. It's I see where you're coming from, but that's just my hot take on this. So,
and I think it's a good take. I mean, I think that's a good point. There is that kind of fear, and there is this. I don't want to say it's like baseball with unwritten rules because there's actually a lot of written rules too.
Totally.
But like we talk about with Colin, I think there's things that you can do that are still respectful of tradition, of how people perceive, because I mean, let's face it, that's part of what people are doing when they're getting a lawyer. I went to talk to my lawyer. They didn't say I Skyped my lawyer. There's a certain personal level of interaction there. But I mean, there's some things like in the article that they say talking about using electronic signature technology, that saved so much time and money of mailing and faxing documents back and forth.
Huge.
So it's things like that. Like, it doesn't have to be, we're going to make our entire office virtual and have all our conferences video. You could look into that if you want to, But there's smaller things that you can take that take advantage of some of this technology in a impactful way that aren't going to cause, it's not going to cause major disruption to how you practice law.
And that's the point. It should just be an addition, a enhancement. It's not a replacement, it's an enhancement. So when you think of tech innovations as enhancements, now we're getting somewhere, because you still play an integral part to figuring out what the tech does, when it does it, and why. So figuring out procedures and processes, problems, that's the first thing. And once you understand those, that's when you can really impactfully implement, tech innovation.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
We really have a relationship with Consultwebs that goes beyond simple business-to-business marketing. We have grown up with them as a company. They were there for us when we started. We were there for them when they started.
So I think that we were Consultwebs' first personal injury client 15 or 16 years ago.
I've been working with them directly for 10 years now, and they've always been a fantastic partner.
It's vitally important to us that when somebody says you should hire Bellick & Fox, and they go to the Bellick & Fox website, they're going to go beyond the website and contact us.
They understand storytelling, they understand technology, they understand a website isn't just text on a page, it's how you create an expectation for what that means to work with us.
When we get a case, they are very excited in a really genuine way that I think reflects the fact that they sort of view their success tied to ours. So that's why we've continued to use them.
I've never had anything but praise for how they've been able to market our website.
Go to consultwebs.com to learn more.
And now, for a lawsome interview.
Colin Levy is an experienced in-house corporate lawyer, blogger, and programmer who is uncommonly curious about the practice of law from a unique perspective. Colin believes that technological advances in the practice of law should be embraced rather than feared. As a practicing attorney, Colin focuses on the management side of practicing law, in particular how processes and procedures can both help and hurt a lawyer's ability to provide responsive and efficient legal services. His prolific blog and his passionate tweets on legal tech innovation brought him to the attention of this podcast, and we're honored to discuss the latest in tech innovation and the Renaissance lawyer with Colin Levy today. Welcome to Lawsome, Colin.
Thanks very much.
Tell us about your background. You're a contract lawyer and now blogger, legal tech enthusiast, who's also learning to code. What inspired the lawyering, and then what inspired the coding?
Sure. So I'll start with the lawyering first. I kind of had a little bit of a unusual / non-linear path to becoming a lawyer, or at least finding a career as a lawyer, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So I graduated from law school in 2010 into quite possibly one of the worst legal markets that there was. And I happened to be in the Boston area, which is a pretty relatively small legal market, very vibrant legal market, but relatively small. So for a couple of years, I kind of just bounced around among different roles, trying to get experience, which of course I needed before I could finally find a real permanent role.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started sort of my career off with Velcro Group Corporation, which is part of Velcro Industries, which makes Velcro brand hook and loop products. So I was there for a period doing a lot of contract work, managing contracts, negotiating contracts with both domestic and global partners. And then after that, I took a little time off for a couple of reasons, and then rejoined the legal world. And I'm now at Pearson Education as their manager for contract negotiations, and I manage and negotiate the rights to use content in Pearson products and assist with associated IP and copyright related issues. Now, all that being said, this legal tech passion of mine started a couple years ago. I just saw sort of the signs of legal tech starting to take hold and really wanted to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was a little fearful because I was not really much of a computer science guy. I kind of stayed away from all of that in college. In fact, I almost became an econ major in college, but didn't because I didn't want to take one of these classes that was actually a bit of programming, and I was so afraid of
Ironic.
doing that. Yes. So I didn't do that. I ended up being a public policy major, but anyway, so I really started to just figure it out. All right, well, if I want to get into legal tech, I might just dive head in. And thankfully, with my job, I'm managing to find time to do it. And I thought the best way to do it would be to start blogging about it, but also primarily start talking to as many people as possible about it. And that has led to all sorts of doors opening, all sorts of really terrific insights. And so now my blog is devoted to legal tech issues, and I write about it because I like to write about tech. I also like to learn about tech, and I like to educate others about tech. So that's sort of where I'm coming from with regards to that. Now, as for the coding specifically, I'm learning to code primarily because I just want to learn. I'm not really seeking to become a programmer per se, but I think that it would be to my benefit to kind of learn the nitty-gritty of how some of this tech stuff works.
So in specific, that code that you're talking about, a lot of people aren't sure if coding is, are you programming a website? Are you doing data analytics? What kind of coding are you working on?
Sure. So not anything too substantive at the moment. I'm just simply in the midst of learning Python right now. I envision myself potentially building some sort of basic program, but I need to find a problem I want to solve first. I'm not just going to build a program that doesn't do anything.
Right.
So, I'm trying to just get my skills up to where I need them to be before I venture into that area, but that's sort of where I'm at this point.
So I have a question, because in my line of work, primarily, I work in the advertising side of things, and a lot of the work that we do is in like Google AdWords, and there's a ton. The whole thing is shifting where you can use like JavaScript to execute things on a bigger scale. So I had to start learning JavaScript, and one thing I noticed is that the programming mindset is something that was a bit of a leap for me in how to break problems down into like the very basic thing. Like each line is like, okay, we have to start to solve this problem, and then we have to solve. So you're kind of taking these chunks in there. Have you found anything like that where that was kind of a surprise? It was like, wow, I have to really swing around the way I think into a totally different thing.
Yeah, I've always been a bit of a pretty heavily analytic person, but that being said, when you are learning to program, you really have to be even more so and be really, really focused on sort of the basics as you just laid out. Each line of code has a specific purpose. So yes, there was a bit of a shift in my mindset that was required because it's very, you're detail oriented as a lawyer because you have to be, but programming really kind of holds your feet to the fire with regards to being that detail oriented, because if you aren't, then you're going to find out later that your program doesn't work. Now, the great thing about Python, at least, is you can test it out. You can test lines of code and it will kind of be a little more specific as to what went wrong, as opposed to some other languages like JavaScript, for example, where you can write a whole program and then at the end realize, oh, this isn't doing what I think it's going to be doing. Now I have to go back through and debug. So there is that component that you certainly have to wrap your mind around, and it can be, if you're not used to it, it certainly can be frustrating and I think maybe even a little surprising. But I think long run, I think the benefits of having that type of thinking is really useful and powerful and has a broad array of applications.
It seems like if it is line by line, finding time to code and also work, how do you balance your schedule and set time aside for your coding work and also eating food, and sleeping? Do you code that into the day? Need to code myself a sandwich.
Well, we're not yet at the point where you can just think about a sandwich and it magically appears in front of you.
It would taste horrible too. A 3D printed sandwich, yeah.
Right. Yes, and we're not at the Star Trek stage where you have a replicator and you can just replicate something.
Yeah.
But for me, I plan everything out. And so it's important for me to make sure that I plan everything out so I don't get overwhelmed. So that's sort of how I manage things as I set aside time each day to do this stuff, and at the same time, work around my work schedule, which is the priority, of course, at least at the moment. So, that's sort of how I operate. And I also, I'm embarrassed to say that I also plan out my social activities too. So I have to, because of the number of things I'm doing, and I have a habit of sometimes saying yes to too many things and taking on too much. But yeah, that's sort of how I work around it. My day job comes first, and then legal tech I kind of fit in around what I have to do for my day job, and it ends up working out well because thankfully I have a fair degree of flexibility with my day job. So it works, at least right now it does.
It's funny too, you say that, and I've noticed that myself. Like you can get real deep into the coding stuff, and sometimes it's like I need to just step away. So I find myself doing the same things of just blocking off time so that I have that mechanism in there to say, okay, we're not going to work on this for 6 hours straight. Like let's take a break, clear your head, come back to it later. It's useful. It's helpful. I think planning is a good thing. What is legal tech innovation to you, and what is it not?
I think that, that's sort of a loaded question in the sense that innovation and legal tech innovation both are fairly overused words and phrases, and I think their meanings unfortunately have become a bit diluted. But that being said, I think that for me at least, legal tech innovation means essentially using tech to improve a process that already exists in a way that has not been done before, and that produces gains in efficiency and productivity. Others may disagree, but that's essentially how I view it. As an example of that, I was just reading today that they have this kind of crazy yet amazing way of preventing trucks from getting stuck in tunnels in Australia, because they have the Sydney Harbour Tunnel is notorious for having a low ceiling height, and trucks oftentimes get stuck in the tunnel. So what Australia did, which is kind of cool, is that they have signs and they have flashing lights and things, but they actually have this really cool system where if a truck gets too close to the entrance to the tunnel, water stops falling from the entrance to the tunnel in a waterfall, and then a big giant stop sign is reflected on that water. So it's essentially this in-your-face system where a truck driver has no choice but to see that stop sign reflected in the water and stops. And it actually has resulted in a lot of prevention of accidents from trucks being stuck in the tunnel. And it sounds crazy, but I saw a video of it this morning, and it works. And it's just sort of, I think that's the type of innovation that I think about. Is this sort of, that's a little bit of an extreme example, but that being said, they have this problem and signs aren't working, lights aren't working, so have a physical barrier, but actually doesn't do any damage to the vehicle, and it's pretty cool.
So that's what it is. What isn't legal tech innovation?
Yes. So on the flip side, change for the sake of change, that's not, in my view, that's not innovation, and at the same time it can result in additional problems. In addition, legal tech innovation isn't just applying tech to solve a problem or resolve an issue, because at the end of the day, if you just simply apply a shiny piece of tech to something, it may end up creating a new problem, exacerbating an existing problem, or at the very least won't solve your existing problem. What you need to do is you have to take a process-oriented approach and look at the process that has the problem, look at the problem within the process, and then figure out, okay, how do we want to solve this problem? And then once you have gone through that analysis, then go out and find, tech that exists, or if tech doesn't exist, create it to solve that specific problem. That's sort of how I think of innovation, and that's sort of what I would think is innovation. And in terms of it not being it, it's not a matter of just simply applying tech to solve a problem, and it's not a matter of simply creating a piece of tech for the sake of creating a piece of tech either. It's more nuanced, it's more complex, it's more process oriented than that.
So speaking of processes for our audience, is there an example of problematic time wasting processes in a general law firm that you think legal tech could solve?
Sure. I mean, there are already, I think, some problems that tech has been able to solve, especially in the areas of contract management and in document automation, and also in terms of intake. For example, I was just talking to someone who is working on a tech startup where they're working in the access to justice area, and one major problem that a lot of these legal services centers have is that they have to do these repetitive tasks that take up time to prevent them from actually helping people because they have to go through this process first. For example, completing an intake form. And so what the startup is doing, one of the things that they have helped with, and other software has helped with as well, is automating that process such that lawyers don't have to do it and they can focus on actually helping the client with whatever legal problem they have rather than filling out a form. So I think that's one example where legal tech has stepped in and solved a very specific problem that's resulted in efficiency and productivity gain.
Yeah.
So to follow up on that, and it's interesting that you brought up access to justice, because we had a show where we discussed that too. Do you see, the question Jake asked you was about the, like, in a law firm. Do you see other examples in general in the legal system, for example, where tech could solve some problems like access to justice?
In the broader sense of the word, you mean in terms of a broader problem that the legal system is facing?
Yeah, definitely. Like, how maybe some things could be handled online, or there could be filings or something that could be done more efficiently using tech.
Absolutely. Actually, one example I was just thinking about is that Ross Intelligence just came out with, which is EVA, which is this legal tech tool using artificial intelligence that allows you to analyze briefs, check sites, and find similar cases. So it's this free tool, and it essentially allows you to check a history of cited cases, see if they're a good law, and review a brief. And essentially, it helps you conduct this research more efficiently so that you don't have to physically spend so much time doing it. You have this tool that does it for you. So that's an example, I think, of a tool that law firms could use to help sort of speed up and be more productive with their work and allow you to sort of get on with the more substantive work that needs to be done rather than spending so much time on sort of researching case law.
Nice.
Nice.
We had a conversation too about that, where people were talking about using machine learning for doing discovery and research and stuff like that. It's fascinating. I mean, it just seems like there's just so many opportunities there to make things better and to let people focus more on what they want to be doing rather than searching through piles and piles of documents or whatever.
So the theme of the show is a Renaissance lawyer. I reached out to you because usually our guests are people who used to be lawyers helping lawyers, or kind of ancillary to the law, but actually talking to a lawyer who is finding time to code, who's passionate about this legal tech stuff, I think is nice. But I'm wondering, in the future, lawyers are going to need to wear a lot of hats. So what hats specifically do you think the Renaissance lawyer will need in the future? One
of them, I think, and this is something I've tweeted about before, is the need for greater quantitative literacy among lawyers. The old adage is you go to law school to avoid going to business school and avoid some of that math. And at this point, I think you're doing your clients and yourself a disservice by not having a certain degree of fluency in quantitative analysis. And what I mean by that is, you could be a corporate lawyer and you need to evaluate, a company's viability. You have to be able to evaluate, I have to look at their financial statements, their income statement, their balance sheet, and you need to understand what that means. I'm not saying you need to do complex calculus, but you need to be able to do some basic mathematical analysis. Similarly, for a litigator, you need to be able to look at, the potential costs involved in doing due diligence and doing potential discovery and potential outcomes of litigation, costs of involving experts and things like that. In addition, I think in general, a lawyer needs to be able to, if they're representing a business or if they're representing a person, they need to be able to understand that which they're representing. And I think in order to do that, you need to be able to take a holistic approach, and that includes both a qualitative and a quantitative analysis. And so I think it's important to be able to have some of those kind of basic business skills, such as quantitative analysis. In addition, I think it's also important to be able to exercise some degree of business judgment, have some business acumen, understand how businesses work. And also, I think perhaps most importantly above all else is project management. Be able to understand how to manage a project from start to finish and not just work on that project. And I think, again, these are skills that law schools are slowly but surely incorporating into their curriculums, but I think they're vital for lawyers to have. And I think that is a result of not just the influence of legal tech, but just the changing nature of the practice of law and the fact that clients are demanding more of their lawyers. And in addition, you're dealing with the more for less challenge, where you are faced with having to do potentially more work with less resources. And so you yourself need to be more resourceful.
In the future, and I've seen it now, there's a lot of snake oil salesmen with shiny new tech. And they're selling it at high premiums to gullible lawyers and law firms hungry to differentiate or outcompete. So saying that I have an engineer on staff, saying I have access to blockchain, but not knowing what those things do or how they connect. I think a lot of people are going to have the wool pulled over their eyes, but is there something like a tip that you could give lawyers for them to be mindful of so they don't get taken up the digital river?
Sure. Going back to what I said earlier, I think that one of the key tips I could have is approach any person potentially trying to sell you a piece of tech with a little bit of healthy skepticism, but at the same time, be knowledgeable about your needs and about what problems you're trying to solve. Don't just look at tech as something that is great and can just solve all your problems. There's no tech that can solve all of your problems. In fact, tech really is best when it solves a specific problem, which again goes back to something I said, which is that you need to really understand what specific needs your business has, and you can only do that by understanding the processes that are currently in place, how they work, and what issues arise during the course of going through those processes and where the pain points are, and then figuring out, okay, and then seeing, all right, what tech is out there and what seems to be able to most address this specific pain point. So, that's not to say that you should not use tech. I am far from that person.
Right.
But at the same time, I think it's important to be knowledgeable and educate yourself about what your issues are and also about what the tech out there is and what it can and can't do. Because, like you said, there are a lot of folks out there, unfortunately, who are purporting to sell tech that may not actually solve your problem. It may solve a different problem, which is great, but if it's not going to solve your problem, it doesn't help you.
Well, I'm a little worried because I could see a lawyer who doesn't have time to appreciate all this stuff, who knows that they need to be more holistic about the processes, who wants to be more quantitatively analytic. But how can a lawyer get help understanding these things? Like, is there a way that people can find out this information or have assistance?
Well, I think one way is you have to do some of this work yourself. I think another way, and this will probably be becoming a real job, I believe probably in the near future, would be sort of a legal operations person, or in fact, some companies now have entire legal operations departments for that, whose sole mission it is to evaluate sort of the operations of the department, keep finances in check, control expenses, and evaluate how efficient the processes you have in place are. So that's sort of the type of folks I would go to if your company or firm already has one. If not, then I think you need to do some work yourself, or have the assistance of an admin help you out, who more than likely will know better about the processes and how they work and how they don't work than you. So that would be my advice. But at the end of the day, I think ultimately, it comes down to you and you being willing to kind of invest the effort and to be able to help yourself to a certain extent.
That's a really good point too, talking about the having someone who can understand and have sort of that looking down kind of perspective, because to me what it comes down to is that the tech, the software, whatever it is you're using, it's just a tool. You can't say I bought a bunch of wrenches so now I can fix a car. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
there's
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Like you have to have a really good understanding of what it is you're trying to accomplish, and use these different pieces to help that happen.
Yeah.
So talking about that, what's on the horizon for legal tech? What's exciting?
What's exciting to me is the increase in the number of startups that are seeking to solve, specific problems with tech. I also think that sort of a little bit further down the line is the continued advance of artificial intelligence and tools that employ artificial intelligence. And I think that's going to be really exciting and very impactful. You already are starting to see some tools that use it and some signs of its increasing influence, but we're not quite there yet. It's not, it's still sort of a little bit out there in some ways. But I think it's really exciting, the continued development. And frankly, what's really exciting to me is the fact that there are so many people out there who are excited about this stuff, and the growing number of people who are excited about this stuff, and the number of people who want to get involved. I think it's really great because ultimately I want to not just help people learn about tech and write about tech and potentially develop it myself, but I also want to break down the silos that currently exist between the tech world and the legal world, and sort of facilitate greater collaboration among all sorts of lawyers and all sorts of programmers. And I think that can only happen with the enthusiasm and interest of others. And I see a lot of that continuing right now and being on the rise. And that's really exciting to me. It's just really a sign that this stuff is being embraced by the wider community.
Wrapping it up, how can people learn more about you, Colin?
Probably one of the best ways is to visit my blog without tooting my own horn too much.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, toot away. Absolutely. That's what we're here for.
So it's colinlevy.com. And then you can find out all about me and my career path. I also have some resources on there for folks interested in tech stuff, and also have obviously my blog posts. Another way to get in touch would be to follow me on Twitter, which is my Twitter handle is clevy_law. And in addition, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can reach out to me that way. And I am happy to have a discussion with anyone and whomever is interested in this stuff. I'm pretty passionate about it, and I love hearing others who are passionate about it and learning from others. So, there's always something more to learn. So it's, that's what keeps me motivated.
10 questions we ask everyone.
So here we go with the cleverly named 10 questions we ask everyone. Number 1, what was the last book you read?
Last book I read was Tomorrow's Lawyers by Richard Susskind. For some reason, the name was escaping me, even though he's so prominent.
Right. Good.
Got
Okay. Number 2, what is your best habit?
My best habit is probably approaching everything with the same degree of dedication and perseverance and tenacity.
Nice.
Yeah.
Number 3, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm asking anyway. Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, or none of the above?
Twitter.
Twitter. That's right. That's where all the cool kids are. Number 4, coffee or tea?
Tea.
Okay. Number 5, what's your favorite place?
My favorite place is probably Vermont.
Nice.
The Green Mountains of Vermont. It's peaceful, and I can disconnect, literally. So it's great.
Nice. That's good. It's good to do that. Number 6, is Keanu Reeves a good actor?
Honestly, no.
Okay, it's acceptable. Number 7, what was your first job?
My first job was a barista / salesperson at a Borders bookstore back when Borders existed.
Oh,
Nice.
Borders.
Remember
man.
that. Books.
Yeah.
Love it.
I was terrible at it.
I couldn't work at Borders because I'd be too distracted. Just
Quit reading the
sorry,
books,
I was over
yeah.
there reading.
I worked the espresso machine to save my life.
That's hilarious. Number 8, what is a skill you have outside your current occupation that you incorporate into your work?
Well, this isn't really a skill. I suppose it's more of a quality, but I'm adventurous, and so I'm not afraid to try new things and kind of dive into things and see if they work out or not. I like to go whitewater rafting, for example, so I'm not afraid to take a risk. I'm not sure if that
Nice.
answers your question or not.
Yes.
It
No,
does,
that's
definitely.
yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
big part of coding, yeah.
So you already mentioned the resources section on your website, so that may kind of preclude this question, but what sites, blogs, or newsletters do you regularly check in with?
I have some of these on my blog. One is written by Robert Ambrogi. He's a really prominent legal thought leader
Oh, yeah.
in the innovation space. Another is written by Mark A. Cohen, who's another really great thought leader in the legal innovation space. Those are probably the two top ones that come to mind. And then there's a whole bunch of other folks, and I apologize, I can't think of all of them just right off the top of my head.
That's good because we put you on the spot. You didn't know this. A lot of people do that. Like they say, my Twitter feed or my LinkedIn is my resource. Because I follow these people and stuff. So yeah, I mean that's pretty common.
Right.
Sure.
And actually, so here's the other one I was going to mention is the Law 21 blog by Jordan Furlong, who is also another really great thought leader.
Okay. Cool.
So
very
yeah.
cool. All right. We've made it to the end here, Colin. Number 10. After a long day or a long week at work, how do you relax and unwind?
I relax by hanging out with my 2 cats.
Sweet. I got 2 cats too. They're the best. That's awesome. Cool. Well, that's it. We've made it to the end. Thank you for playing and being a good sport. About 10 questions we ask everyone.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
For show notes, links, and info, go to www.consultwebs.com/LawsonPodcast. Be sure to leave us a review and rating in iTunes or wherever you find the you listen to. Until next week, stay lawson.